This is the Norris Group's Real Estate Investor Radio Show, the award-winning show dedicated to thought leaders shaping the real estate industry and local experts revealing their insider tips to succeed in an ever-changing real estate market. Hosted by author, investor, and hard money lender, Bruce Norris.
Welcome, everybody, to the Norris Group Real Estate Radio Show and Podcast. We're doing a special show today. Joining me today is Bruce Norris, live and in person in Riverside, California. When Bruce does these presentations for the clubs, there's been references in his presentations to a couple of books, and inevitably throughout the years, I've always gotten these emails from people or questions actually during the Zoom call. Does Bruce have a top five, list of books that he would recommend that you read? And so that was kind of the brainchild of this show. We're going to go ahead and talk about some influential books that Bruce has read throughout the years and has impacted his career, especially early on. And so we'll go from there. But before we get started, hi, Bruce.
Hey, Joey. How you doing? Good seeing you.
And so, but Bruce, are books recreational for you, or was it a matter of business why you started reading them?
When I was a kid, honestly, the only books I read was like one of those series books with adventures. I'm even drawing a blank on the names of the books, but it was like the Hardy Boys. There you go. That was literally the only books I read. And so I did not pick up that habit until I got married. I got married at 17, and after getting fired a few times, I started thinking maybe it's me. You don't want to blame yourself for anything, so it's always out there. But then I really started doing some soul searching, thinking maybe I actually need some help here. So I think that was the start of me looking at what I could find on my own. So it wasn't like I was a voracious reader. I just wanted to keep a job. That was my original thought. And a lot of the list of the books that we're going to be covering, nothing to do with real estate. And so maybe we'll visit that topic in another, five favorite real estate books or something like that. But I had to bring the right person to the real estate business. And all of these books helped me do that. Okay.
So this wasn't more of a, like, hey, this is going to have an impact in your career. Like you didn't know that. You were just trying to get incrementally better every time you read a book.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out how to maneuver at work and life. I was pretty irritated at life, frankly. I didn't enjoy that. I felt like the victim and all that nonsense, so it's not fun to have that as an employee. So, like a chip on your shoulder type thing. And the more I got fired, the bigger the chip got. And so it took a few firings, and, we had that Harold Pomeroy moment where he basically changed my life because he pissed me off to such a large extent, telling me the truth. You let your family down every day by not trying hard. That was a great thing to say to me, because I didn't connect those dots, but when he did, it was life-changing. So I think maybe it wasn't until after that I actually started looking at how to improve myself. Because up until then, I was just resentful about stuff. I had been fired 5 times in a row. The first time was actually not fair, and I retained that for a long time. The guy that fired me was a manager of a department I worked for. The firing came from the president of the company, as he fired all the people in the department other than the manager. And the manager and I got along great, and he knew I did a great job, and he was crying when he gave me my severance pay. Well, in the back of my mind, I went, is this how this works? And I got ticked, and I just thought, okay, well, the heck with trying hard. And, I thought the world owed me a check or something. So the next 4 people that hired me got the resentful guy that got fired wrongfully. And then I figured out no one cares how low you'll sink. If you want to be on food stamps, which we were for 1 month, I never got them again because my wife was embarrassed to go to the store with them. And actually, the first time she used them, there was somebody at the cash register. The cashier gave her a hug and said, there, honey, it'll be okay. And that was like, okay,
Oh man.
you know, so that, okay, so I had landed on the bottom square due to my own resentment. And Harold Pomeroy fixed that in one sentence about my effort. But then I needed some tools, and that's what these books provided.
Okay, well then let's jump in them now. Are these books in order of importance to you, or just, hey, you know what, these are
Oh,
just top 5 in my list, and we'll go through
well,
them and
it is a sequence of how they were introduced to me.
okay.
Yeah, that's kind of why I did that. So the first one, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I had a problem with creating escalating situations. I don't know if you've ever had that trouble, but if there was a bone of contention, I could make it twice as bad as it was going to be, or it should have been.
Oh yeah, hold my
And
beer.
this, yeah, it's just I was on the edge, and I was again resentful and all that, and I brought that to everything. And this book, it's kind of funny. There's usually one sentence in a book where I could put the book down and go, okay, I got it. And there was basically a sentence, and it says, you have to learn to avoid the acute angle. And what it was meant, it was basically just diffuse stuff. Don't escalate it. And I just thought, I think I could do that. And so it became a game for me that even in things that were just obviously should be escalated, that you could take it the other direction. And I actually enjoyed the process because it was astonishing to the other side. So I'll give you 2 quick examples that had to do with the house buying business. So I implemented this a long time before the examples I'm going to give you, but this would be an example of how the outcome changed because of my understanding what this book was telling me to do. I had bought a home in Corona. I just bought it, and it had an automatic sprinkling system going, and it was cockeyed, and the guy had just washed his truck next door, and it soaked his truck when it went on automatically. So he came over. Now, I'd never met him. He didn't knock on the door. That kind of knock, and he's your blankety blank sprinkler system just soaked my newly washed truck. Now, the old Bruce would say,
is this before black belt, Bruce? Is this before your black belt or after?
I can box, pal. I'm ready. Anyway, so he was like, so I just immediately went into defuse mode, and I kind of smiled at the guy. I said, that doesn't sound like a situation that 2 reasonable guys can't solve. He looked at me, he goes, yeah, you're right. I'll just move my truck. And it was that kind of game, One of my sons read a note that I actually wrote to a guy that had parked his car in my driveway. And I know he read the note to see what nasty thing I was maybe saying. And what I said in the note was, I appreciate you parking your car in my driveway because it now appears that somebody lives here. Thank you very much. Well, the car never got parked there again.
That's one of the things that in this book, it has 6 things to make people like you, right? And one of the things I always remembered is smile. And you said that right at the first thing you did. I smiled at him and I said, what you said. And that's, one of this book is really based on the golden rule, right?
Yeah. And it really became a game that I recognized instantly. Every time there was an escalation, it was my goal to defuse it and make it 0. And you can do it. And your life is just so much better. I mean, I was just always escalating things to the ridiculous level. And now I was on the opposite end of things that you could be legitimately contest when it's a nothing, and your life was so much better.
Yeah.
So this was a big step for me because I stopped being angry at life. I just did.
One of my mentors in insurance before I, a long time ago when I was selling insurance, he always told me, be easy to work with. And that always stuck with me. Just be easy to work with. The guy's a jerk. All right, well, I'm not going to reciprocate that. You know what? How could I help you? and that's kind of how I've always, treated people. Like that, I want them to enjoy their interaction with me, and that's always stuck with me, and that's kind of based on the same principle. All right, so let's talk about number 2 on your list is See You at the Top by Zig Ziglar. Now, this is a book I haven't read, so I'll rely on you to kind of talk about it.
Well, Zig Ziglar was really well known for sales. So he was a door-to-door salesman, a great closer. So it was a sales book for sure. But he had a quote in there, and this was kind of cool because it tells you who he was. He said, "Live in such a way that if somebody should speak badly of you, no one would believe it." I really like that.
That's a dirty lie, sir.
Well, in other words, that would be so cool to have such a reputation that somebody heard something and it's just like, that's BS.
Yeah.
It's funny. I hadn't thought about this. My buddy Glenn, that I've known forever, right? Since ninth grade. I was at a dance or something for high school, and somebody said that Glenn smoked marijuana. And I was not in the mood to hear that. I challenged the guy literally to a fight right then. And he says, no. He says, "I'm not kidding you. Go ask Glenn." So I went to go ask Glenn, and he said, "Yeah, I do." And I'm like, I'm about ready to kick his butt. I was just, oh my
I'm
gosh,
defending your bad name.
That's right. He said, "What?"
That's
anyway,
funny.
it's just anyway. But Zig Ziglar was a great closer. And so he had nothing to do with real estate, but there were some things that I read in his book. And that was probably the first book about sales that I ever read. And I actually drove around with it in a tape. And that was why I liked getting into sales, because I could now listen to stuff. So Ziglar was one of the people that I listened to, and he had stories. So I'll tell you one of the stories and then how that translated into a real estate situation. He went into a hotel in Houston, and he said, "Reservation for Zig Ziglar." "Sorry, Mr. Ziglar, we can't find it." "When did you make the reservation?" He said, "About 2 weeks ago." And she said, "Honestly, every room in this hotel has been booked for a solid year, because this weekend is the doctor convention that we have every year." And he said, "So there's just no way 2 weeks ago a reservation would have been available." And without batting an eye, Ziglar said, "I see." He says, "Let me ask you a question. Do you consider yourself an honest woman?" She said, "I certainly do." I said, "Okay, I'm an honest man. If the president of the United States walked in the hotel tonight, would you have a room for him?" And she said, "Certainly well, if the president came in, we'd find a room for him." "You're an honest woman. I'm an honest man. He's not coming tonight. I'll take his room." and he got the room. Now, I listened to that tape, never thinking that I would use that close verbatim, but in a really an impossible situation. We had a construction sale. Excuse me, we were constructing a duplex and it was sold, but we had to get a demand from Security Pacific Bank to get a payoff so we could close escrow. And they were delaying it. Finally, when you get a loan approval, it's only good for so long. So literally, if we didn't get that demand, the escrow was going to fall out. We'd have to start again. It was a big deal, a really big deal, because our construction loan was done as far as the due date, so it could be foreclosed on. So we had to get a yes answer. My partner went to the bank and forcibly asked for the demanded the demand, got escorted out of the bank by security. He was so, belligerent. So he calls me up. He says, "Bruce, we're not getting the demand today." I said, "That is actually not possible to be acceptable. So pull off the freeway and turn around and head back to the bank." He said, "There is no way." So on the phone, I call the lady that had kicked him out with security helping him out. And I said, "Hi, I'm Bruce Norris. I'm the partner of the gentleman you just had taken out of the bank." She said, "I'm glad to talk to you." So she chewed at me for a couple minutes. She said, "This is the way it works, pal. You mail in a request for the demand. When we get to it, we fill it out. We mail it back. Any other questions?" I said, "Yes." I said, do you consider yourself an honest woman? She said, I certainly do. I said, if you needed the demand for yourself today, could you walk out the bank with it? There's a pause, and she said, yes, I could. I said, just this once, could you treat a customer with the same consideration that you could treat yourself? There's a pause. She says, I cannot believe you're going to get that demand. I said, well, here's the bad news. My partner is going to be the one that picks it up. She said, I will not let him in the bank. I will slip it through the crack of the door.
Wow.
So reading these books, you never know what's going to help you, but that attitude that I have to get a yes answer is in your head because you've watched this process and the impossible happen. And that's happened so many times. I think that was sort of the birth of the talk that we do right now, Unintended Journey, because there's so many of those moments for me that if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have gone any further. It was the end of the road type stuff. And so reading that book was a big help in those situations where you think, well, this is a definite answer, no answer for 99.9% of the population, but would Zig Ziglar get it done? Yeah.
Bruce Ziegler. All right. So the next, go ahead.
Nice to be able to borrow. That's the thing. You're getting touched by these books. So I learned not to aggravate people in the first book. And now I learned to get them to cooperate in completely obnoxious settings. The story about getting the guy to sign or get the paperwork at the gate. I've got it very early in my career. Yeah, I've got to get a guy that is a multi-gazillionaire already in the 80s out of his 10,000 square foot house at 4 a.m. And I asked him a series of questions, and it's like, do you own a business? Yes. Have any salespeople? Yes. Last question. If I worked for you and the only way I could do what you needed me to do was push a buzzer at 4 a.m, would you want me to do it? And then there was a pause and he says, I'll be right down. So I over and over again, but these were not real estate books. These were persuasion books and how to change your life books.
It's a skill set that you're building. And these books are, one by one teaching you. So what did the next book, Seasons of Life by Jim Rohn, teach you?
Well, Jim Rohn was really a seminar, and I was forced to go to that inside of 30 days of me being in the house buying business. And I worked for a company, and he had all the employees go to this seminar. I had never been to any seminar. My brother Dwight had gone to a few. I was very suspicious of, I just was. So I was the disgruntled attendee. I had no choice. And then within a couple minutes, I wrote my first note on top page, and I got the impression he was there for a really wholesome reason. I didn't feel like he needed a thing from me. And I thought, I'm going to pay attention to this guy. And the first thing that struck me is there were sentences that he said that were so perfect that I just like, how long did it take you to say it that way? I mean, it's just a perfect sentence. And, I just started taking a lot of notes. And I think one of the stories that he said, and this is, I suppose, one of the reasons I tell stories, is because what changed his life was a Girl Scout coming to his door, selling him a $2 box of cookies. He's 26 years old. He's married, not successful. And the girl does a really good job. And he wants to buy it. Trouble is,
she read the Zig Ziglar book, right?
Right. And he didn't have $2. So what does he do? He lies to her. He actually tells her, yeah, you're just late. There was a girl before you and I bought 10 boxes. So she very nicely left. And then he slumps to the floor and cries. That was his moment where it's like, that's never happening again. And one of the things it did for him is, and one of the reasons I carry the money that I do, is he always carried hundreds of dollars. And so if he ever met up with a Girl Scout cookie sale, he bought the whole thing. And I just, that kind of thing changed his life. Well, that night was the first time I heard about setting goals and being able to borrow something in your past that motivated you. And I just knew what that was. That was that Harold Palmer moment telling me I was letting my family down. That emotion I got to borrow and plug into anything I wanted to accomplish with that kind of intensity. That was an amazing tool. And so that's what that seminar gave me, was a tool to go. And I love getting irritated because of that, to be honest with you. It's not that I want to be irritated, but I know what to do with it. So if something bad happens, I get that hat on. It's like, okay, I'm not going anywhere. I'm solving this. And so that's just a great series of tools. I just loved how he talked. I went to his seminar probably every year for 8 years in a row. I had written an 8-year goal to be a millionaire. And on the 8th year, I went there with my little chart, the chart that's supposed to have a straight line to get there. And it was like, life doesn't work out quite that way, but I get there. And it was pretty cool. We had a private meeting at his office. And then when we did the event for, not I Survived,
Millionaire Maker.
Millionaire Maker, I think he was the first guest speaker. And I was in one of the back rows sitting next to somebody when he started speaking, and it was obvious he was very well-to-do and all that. And so somebody that was sitting close to me said, I wonder why he still does this. Well, during a 1-hour presentation, there were 3 unsolicited standing ovations. That's hard to do as a speaker. And at the end of the third one, I looked at, I said, when would you get tired of hearing that?
Yeah, right. Well, I've witnessed this, firsthand being here. One of the, piss Bruce off moments was, the first time we went through the Florida stuff with Dalton.
Yeah.
And that was like, hey, no, I'm going to stand in front of our investors that trusted me, and I'm going to make this right. And I saw it firsthand.
Well, it's a great place to go because I feel undefeatable when I'm there. I really do. I think it comes across. And that switch got clicked instantly, Joey. When Aaron and I figured out the number that was, I just literally, my head went, no, that's not how this is going to end. Bought a plane ticket. I was like the only person on the plane because that was right at the start of COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, and met with the builder, and and he was obviously really upset, thinking that I was going to be completely freaking out. I was in solution mode, man.
Yeah.
I said, hey, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to figure this out. So, fortunately, he made a great effort to get all the subcontractors in that room.
Yeah.
That I had to tell collectively the bad news. And 30 days later, we wrote the checks and solved the problem. But yeah,
well,
I'd say without that training of knowing that, okay, this is solvable, but I have to put my Harold Palmer mood on.
Well, I was about to say the second part of that was watching you, ask me for the list of phone numbers of every single one of those contractors that were owed money. And you went into your office for 3 days straight and just made calls and just negotiated and talked to them. And, I'm sure you heard an earful from everybody, but at the end of the day, I still remember you coming, down the hall, Aaron was in his office, I was in mine. And before you got to Aaron, you just looked at me and you said, we did it. We just got the last one. And like you came in, you gave me a hug, and I was like, man, like we really did it. And then obviously you went next door to Aaron's and to, share the news too. But it was like the culmination of like some just unbelievable pressure.
What was interesting is those phone calls were not unpleasant, oddly enough.
Really?
No, because that meeting, when we stood in front of that group and said, okay, this is the problem. And when people understood that I was putting up money that didn't have anything to do with creating the problem other than I was there to solve it. No, that reaction was so completely positive. I made the first 5 phone calls, and okay, because the number that I was giving people was 60 cents on the dollar, basically. So we had whatever it was, $2.5 million problem, and whatever we had in cash is what that was, what I could do. So it wasn't negotiable, because the first 5 people took the 60 cents on the dollar, and it was all pleasant. As a matter of fact, I think we had staggered the calls every 10 minutes. And the first 5 phone calls didn't take 50 minutes. It took way less. But on the 6th phone call, there was a guy, and him and his wife were owed 150 grand a piece or something like that. And he filed all the paperwork he was supposed to. And he said, Bruce, there's no way that I'm going to discount the thing 40% when I've got everything filed. And I said, well, to be honest with you, the offer is going to have to be exactly the same for everybody on the list, or you just have to take it another direction, because I have to honor the first 5 people that said yes to the offer. And so it's not that I'm trying to be hard. It's the number that I have to have. And so he's like, oh my, it's like it never occurred to him he was going to say yes to this. He said, give me a little time to think about this. And so
you kept coming to my office with like, all right, you'd hand me a folder. Okay, send whatever it was that we were like the agreement. All right, send the agreement.
So he calls me back in about 15 minutes. He said, I cannot believe I'm going to say this, but all right, I'll go along with it. So one of my favorite memories, the reason I told that story is when anybody was owed over 100 grand and discounted, I personally delivered those checks. Because I mean, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. So I go to the office now. His wife has got one of the businesses and he's got the other one. They both were owed a lot of money. So I had both checks, but he's not there. But the woman I hear, and I hadn't talked to her over the phone, she said, I have to go see this guy. And so I'm thinking, okay, what's going to happen? She comes out and she says, I got to tell you that my husband is no joke of a man. He was in that audience that you spoke to with a gun. And
Florida's an open carry.
The fact that you got him to say yes to this, you have chutzpah, young man. It doesn't get better than that, though, Yeah. But I think that same thing, Jim Rohn basically said, you can solve the unsolvable if you get the mindset you're not going anywhere until you get a yes.
That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Norris Group Real Estate Radio Show and Podcast. See you next week.
For more information on hard money loans and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For information on passive investing with trust deeds, visit tngtrustdeeds.com.
The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under California DRE License 012-19911, Florida Mortgage Lender License 1577, and NMLS License 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the Hard Money tab.